housing disaster first responders. So the reason they were activated primarily to serve as a big floating hotel in areas that have been really devastated by some sort of natural disaster. Well, we were activated, and this literally happened the first weekend the new Chancellor arrived at SUNY. So my first interaction as president was on her first week as Chancellor. I called the Chancellor, train ship's going to be activated, we were sent down south. And immediately she put in place a SUNY Strong campaign to collect funds to purchase disaster response resources. So over there on the right, we had about 300 people donate about more than $30,000 that was used to buy bottled water and granola bars. And the picture on the right there is the 24 pallets that were loading up on the train ship that hauled down to Puerto Rico. One of the panels I heard this morning talks about the challenge of shipping stuff down to Puerto Rico because of the weight of that bottled water. Fortunately, we have a 5 or 65 foot train ship that you can haul all the water you want. After we left for Puerto Rico, the governor stood up the New York Stands with Puerto Rico effort, which was a drive to, again, to get the broader state of New York involved in raising funds to provide relief supplies to citizens of Puerto Rico. And through that effort, another 22 pallets of water was purchased and sent down to Florida. We initially were in Florida, Key West, helping with that disaster response when we left for Puerto Rico. So 22 pallets were sent down, loaded up with these 24 pallets. We arrived in Puerto Rico on September 29th. We were there for about a little over a month. We unloaded the pallets of water and they were distributed to the governor of Puerto Rico's United for Puerto Rico effort. We left in October, and over that about a month we were there, we provided 5,000 berths and fed 9,000 meals to first responders. So, and when it felt like we were no longer needed, we were brought home. So that was the first step. The next step was in May of 2018. I made the decision as president of Maritime College, we were going to send the Empire State back down to Puerto Rico for a service project. So this is part of our regular summer sea term with our students. Again, we send about 5 of our students to sea. I like to joke, my fellow presidents think of a president who's going to take the risk of sending 600 students to sea. It's a lot of fun. So our first stop in this particular summer sea term was to Puerto Rico for 3 days. May 21st to the 23rd. We were fortunate to be joined by 30 students from U-Albany and 14 students from the College of ESF to participate in projects in Puerto Rico. One of the things what I will be talking about is when you're trying to organize student trips like this, two of the biggest hurdles are lodging and food. And what I think U-Albany and ESF appreciated was they didn't have to worry about that for the students on this trip because we were providing that for them. And so what we did here is we worked at 6 sites and communities. We did not do home repair. This trip was not about home repair. This trip was about agricultural restoration, cleanup, community restoration, and some mitigation work. Over the 3 days, we contributed 8,000 volunteer hours over the 3 days. And what touched my heart was hearing from the farmers and community leaders that we accomplished months worth of work in just 3 days with all our students working so hard. And I do think that this really led the foundation for our future efforts because we learned a lot as far as who are our partners on the ground. We can partner with like All Hands and Hearts and some other NGOs, and so really that laid the foundation for our future efforts. And again, that led then to the New York Stands of Puerto Rico summer program that was established by the governor. We went down to both 2018 and 2019. This was a SUNY-CUNY joint venture between the two systems. We had about 500 student volunteers. 500 student volunteers from just SUNY, right?
Over the 2 summers?
Yeah, over the 2 summers. 500 students over the two summers. About the same from CUNY. And of the 64 student campuses, we had students from 35 of the 64 student campuses participate. And let me see. And what we did was we worked with partners on the ground to get NGOs on the ground and find projects for our students to work on. We had All Hearts and Hands. We had, Nahama, and then Park 9/11. And each of these nonprofits worked with us, NGOs worked with us to arrange for 2-week deployments. And so each summer, I think we sent 5 to 6 deployments down, each 2 weeks in length. And again, you can see the numbers of students, but let me give you the volunteer hours. In 2018, We had 41,000 volunteer hours in 2018, and we repaired 178 homes. In 2019, we had 26,000 volunteer hours, and we repaired 68 homes and assisted families with building and roof repair. And the big difference between those 2 years, the first year, 2018, we took tradespeople down with us that really helped with work with us. 2019, we did not. In addition, the SUNY Task Force worked with campuses on additional deployments in winter and spring 2019. Over the winter break, we had 83 students from 6 different campuses, plus 20 faculty and staff. And then over spring break of 2019, we had 2 campuses send 25 students down. And again, working with the Puerto Rico Task Force and the partners we established on the ground really facilitate those campuses, doing additional projects outside the summer. What we did at the end of each deployment, this is something that we'll talk about later, is important. At the end of each deployment, we did do a survey of the students and their experiences. We wanted to make sure we understood what the students experienced, both positive and negative. And this is a couple of the student survey testimonials that came back, and all of the students surveyed really commented that this was a highly impactful experience on them personally, professionally, and intellectually. This was service learning, and it's hard. They did earn academic credit. It was a course that they completed, and they learned a lot about themselves. They learned a lot about the people of Puerto Rico, and they learned a lot about disaster recovery and how to go about doing that. Governor Cohen did come down in 2018 to work alongside our students, and I know students enjoy seeing him, as well as our Chancellor went down in 2018 as well to work with our students. Some of the partnerships that were forged, and we talked a lot about this, that we just heard again over lunch about the importance of relationship building, and these were some of the partnerships that we were forged over the past couple of years' efforts with the Puerto Rico Task Force. Memorandums of agreement signed between the SUNY system and University of Puerto Rico Central System. UAlbany here has worked on an expanded MOU with specifically with University of Puerto Rico by Agres. UNICEF has been a huge partner with us. UNICEF really worked with us on the first year funding, the first year service learning projects. And UNICEF, and I'm sure Amy's going to talk about the partnership with New Pulse and the work that they're doing down in Puerto Rico, and it continues on today. And again, all hands and hearts. I was getting mixed up. I'm sorry. Which one was first? I don't know. Hands or hearts? I'm not sure. But all hands and hearts have been a very important partner in this. And I want to say, a positive outcome of this is getting to know all hands and hearts. Were some groups of my students wanted to go down on a separate trip, some completely separate from Puerto Rico. They worked with all hands and hearts to do I think it was a summer deployment to the Virgin Islands, which was 3 2-week deployments from my school down to the Virgin Islands, which was a great experience for our students. So that's all I'd like to say, I think, as far as background on the Puerto Rico Task Force, and I'll leave up to my panelists to fill any gaps that I might have forgot. What I'd like to do is ask the panelists to come up, and what we'd like to do is we're going to go through a series of questions, and Marla and Mark, just tell me when you want me to cue up the picture, and I'll cue it up for you. Okay. OAS, come on up. And we'll get started with our panel discussion. I'm sorry? I couldn't use this range.
We can just talk our heads down.
You're not too bad. Well, you can always do this. Because I had the question. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Because I have the question in front of me. So I some in preparation for the panel, I gave 3 suggested questions that I'm going to go through each question sequentially with each panel member. And then after this, we'll open up to questions from you all. So my first question again for each one of the panels is just, again, please introduce yourself, your role at your institution, and what your involvement has been with the SUNY-Puerto Rico Task Force.
Let these guys start. We're an implementing partner. We should go.
Okay.
Oh, way to go. Okay. Well, I'm Mark Lipsis. I'm the Chief of Staff and Chief Sustainability Officer at ESF, as the Admiral mentioned. I've been working in Puerto Rico since 2009. I started down there working on solid waste issues. And some of you may have heard me speak at a renewable energy panel, but as I said there, solid waste is kind of a proxy for a broad range of environmental and sustainability issues. What I mean by that is you're dealing with solid waste, you're also dealing with air pollution, water pollution, environmental justice, energy. So I just kind of got involved in a number of other things as it because of the solid waste experience with the storms. Sorry.
So closer to the microphone, please.
Sorry about that. There we go. When the hurricanes hit, clearly those of you, so how many people were there when Maria came through? So one of the big things was the debris. So then you have a solid waste issue. So I was asked to come down to help design some programs to help manage the debris, particularly the green debris, the brush and tree waste and those kind of things. And in the Virgin Islands as well. So I've been there since the storms, maybe 13 times. That first year, as a result of my kind of looking at the environmental issues related to the storms, I was invited to give testimony to Congress that November and testify on my perspective on the response, which I will talk about in a minute. And I've become a board member of Viellea Love. I'm going to talk about Viellea in a minute. For those of you who don't know what Viellea is, I'll explain that. And also I became a board member of an NGO in the Virgin Islands, Island Green as well. Member of the task force, member of New York Stands, again, focus on disaster debris, ecosystem restoration. And this is where I would like you to put up the first slide. This is going to be kind of awkward, I guess, with this go back and forth. But one of the results of our work is at ESF and our great students. Don't look at any of those other pictures, close your eyes, just look at that. This is the first one. It's all family vacation, yeah. Not with the others. So ESF, our mascot, is the acorn from the mighty oak tree. And so our students right away wanted to do something, so they formed Acorns to Action, our disaster response group. And you see one familiar face there, Paulina. You raise your hand. So Paulina is one of the members, and Devin here. Devin is the current co-president, and Paulina was the leader, so they were really active early on in helping to, with the response, which I'm going to talk about when I talk about the ECAS. So that's my introduction. I'll give some reflections in the next round of questions.
Okay. My name is Angel Hitza, and I am the director of the Institute for Disaster and Mental Health at SUNY-Puerto Rico, just down the road. And I run an institute that has both academic and non-academic components to it. So on the academic side, we have an undergraduate minor in disaster studies, which is an interdisciplinary undergraduate minor. And at the graduate level, we have an advanced certificate in trauma and disaster mental health, which is a postmaster's certificate for licensed clinicians. So this was all already in place. I've been in a job about a year and a half, super busy running this program. And one of the things that we do with the undergrads is they have a course with a terrible name called Disaster Practicum. And as a part of the Disaster Practicum, we've been placing them in Red Cross, local Red Cross sites, county emergency management sites, trying to get them some sort of disaster experience. And then Maria hit, and then somebody from Sally's office called and said, can you take some students and go to Puerto Rico like next week or something like that? And we were super, busy, and I had a full summer ahead of me already, but I felt like I'm running a disaster institute. I probably need to respond to this call, and so I'm really glad we did, because it honestly has changed the trajectory of the institute in some really good ways. But so we took a group, I took a group of 30 students, which is a large number of students to take on a work trip like this. But we did 2 weeks with the group Naha, which is one of the other groups that was mentioned. And the connections and the relationships that we made there included with UNICEF USA, and which led to some funding from them for a mental health program development for teachers and students down there. And so that's the work that we're currently doing, and so I'll be talking more about that in a little while as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Mara Perez-Lugo. I am an environmental sociologist, but nobody's perfect. I am the local. I am the professor from University of Puerto Rico who work with the Puerto Rico Task Force from the inside. And before I start my remarks, well, to give you a little is a network of researchers and faculty and students across the 11 campuses of the UPR that deal with issues related to energy transitions and social acceptance of energy technologies, sustainability, etc. So before Maria, we had some work that was very relevant to the post-Maria era. We had a catalog of resources. We interviewed people across the 11 campuses. We knew exactly who was who and what did what, who did what, who they collaborated with, what they were willing to do in terms of talking to the press or consultancy to communities, what languages they were fluent on. So we had a whole profile of information that was really, really, really necessary after Maria. Communities could have been using it, the government could have been using it. Also, we run the Energy Stakeholder Forum. That stakeholder forum meets about every month and includes about 30 organizations all across Puerto Rico, non-for-profit, government, universities, etc. And a year before Maria, we engaged in the process of developing a vision for the electrical system. So we had a vision, developed in a document. So after Maria, we had the catalog, we knew who was who, we had the vision that was consensually developed for a sustainable electrical system. Now, said that, can you please close your eyes for a moment? Okay. Imagine this apocalyptic scenario in the New York State, in which there's no communications, no water, no houses, no roads, no nothing basically. And you put together all your resources, and the Puerto Rico task force, that is New York task force in this example, goes to Governor Cuomo's office and says, I'm here, I'm ready. I have all these resources, I know how to get to a more sustainable New York, let me help. And Governor Cuomo says, well, about that, you know what, go back to your classroom, make sure that you, take your students in, because we just subcontracted with Stanford University, and they are going to be doing all the planning and all the research for us. So in that context is that I came in contact with the Puerto Rico Task Force, because you guys serve such an important function in opening the space for local scientists and local academics to engage in the reconstruction process, that the local government and even the university itself was not prepared to engage in this particular role. So you opened the door for the people from the UPR system, the local scientists, the local academics, the people that were going to live with the consequences of the recovery and reconstruction process, had at least some voice in this process. So that's the context for my intervention this time.
Now, it's a little outsider. So I'm Ethan Yates, I work for All Hands and Hearts, and we are a volunteer-powered disaster response organization. I think so we've been around for 14 years, and I think what differentiates us in this space is a couple of things. One, we work both domestically and internationally, and most of our peer organizations, if we have peer organizations, work in one bucket or the other. They're really fundamentally two different business models, and so that's complicated. I think two, we believe that those two different business models, if you've worked in both places, you'll know that the U.S. is a bit more competitive and internationally is a bit more collaborative, or at least cooperative. Whether that's because the UN cluster system exists or the scale of the disaster is often bigger internationally. Either way, there's a real difference in the way people kind of work together. I think as an organization, we believe in collaboration for collaboration's sake, which is part of how we get here. I think, number three, and this sort of gets to the heart of the matter, is we're not first responders. We will come early and we will stay late, but we're not first responders. So we don't show up on day one. In the case of Puerto Rico, we did not come to Puerto Rico until January, several months after Maria. And part of that is good policy, and the other part is sort of logistics, right? We have a footprint of a certain size, and because we're not first responders, we know that in an emergency context, we are potentially taking resources away from those on the ground that need them. So we waited for a bit of stability. But we come early and stay late. In the case of Nepal, that's been 5 years. In the case of Puerto Rico, we are still in Puerto Rico, we're still in Texas, and we'll be in the Bahamas for several years. And I think all of these factors sort of make us good partners with academia and with kind of students as well. And so into Puerto Rico, I think the last piece, sorry, this is actually most important. We believe we serve sort of a dual mission. And yeah, I'll do this a little bit in quotes. We believe we serve beneficiaries on the ground in the communities in which we work and the local partners that we work with, but also the volunteers that are doing the work. And for us, if you want to give up your time, whether it's 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, whether you have the skills or don't have the skills, we will put you to work and we will give you the skills. And we believe that volunteers can and should have a transformative experience. And so after Maria, we started having conversations with the governor's office and with some folks at SUNY, and it became clear that we would be a very good sort of plug-and-play option for SUNY as these guys were describing the timeline. It happened very, very quickly, and we had been on the ground, and we take anybody. We take anybody for 2 weeks, 2 months, or longer. That kind of flexibility on the back end, I think, made this a really fruitful partnership.
Thank you. All right, so today's theme, the theme of today's conference is challenges. And so I'm going to throw the panel a slight curveball and change the question just a little bit, but I know you're ready for this. So what I'd like the panel to do is to summarize from your perspective again, what were the accomplishments, or what were also the challenges of the Puerto Rico Task Force efforts in Puerto Rico? So accomplishments and challenges of the task force efforts in Puerto Rico.
So can I start?
Absolutely.
Great. So I think Amy and I were talking before, and I think the timeline laid out by the Chancellor, by the Governor, was aggressive. And I think that was a challenge, but also a primary driver for very qualified, resourceful folks in this room and other rooms getting things done. That kind of bold public declaration, I think, actually was really helpful. But for us, we have volunteer shortages in some places around the globe, rural Texas for one. Puerto Rico is another place where we've ever had a challenge getting volunteers. Our queue has been full since day one. It's still full 2 years later. And so the notion of absorbing 50, 100, 111 finally in the summer of 2018 volunteers on top of an existing queue was very difficult, right? Our model is not like Habitat for Humanity, where you have high highs and sort of troughs in the middle of the week. We try to be consistent, 60 volunteers a day, 5 days a week. And so that timeline was a challenge for us, for sure.
You want accomplishments and challenges?
Yes. Highs and lows. Highs and lows.
Highs and lows, okay. So, meeting Ethan was a high, I was just told to say that. But it's actually true, so I think for us, so at my institute we have, like, as I said, both the academic arm and also the non-academic arm, which is around research and dissemination of best practice in this work. And so one of the things that turned out to be both a challenge and an accomplishment is in my teaching role, I teach a multicultural counseling course, and we talk about cultural humility, and we talk about not helicoptering in, and we talk about all the lessons learned. There's a chapter in a book, and the chapter is called "The Big Wave That Brought PTSD to Sri Lanka," and it's essentially the story of a bunch of Westerners showing up, sort of uninvited, after the tsunami, and potentially creating more mental health problems than they solved. And so I'm in the middle of sort of teaching about this, and then I get this call, can we send students to Puerto Rico? And I had a real concern about, does this now look like New York comes in to save Puerto Rico in some way, and how can I turn this into a learning opportunity that, even as we're doing that and showing up, that we're learning about how that works. And I feel like that was a real, for me, that was a challenge that I faced. Even that first sort of dinner we all went out to during my shift in Puerto Rico, and I said that to my colleagues around the table, like, is anybody, oh God, that is my phone, I am so sorry. Can you just make whoever that is? So sorry. Thank you, Sally. Sort of said, is anybody besides me concerned about how this is going to go in that way? And I think what turned out, first of all, it created really rich learning and discussion opportunities each night with the students to be able to process that live and sort of talking about that, through a book chapter that we read. But at the same time, I think what worked about that is working with partners who knew what they were doing and who were already embedded in the community in a way that was meaningful, and where we were responding to the identified need around the groups, and not just around what I thought as an academic might be a good thing to do. And so I'm a psychologist, and my 30 students that summer were I was handed this giant list of like 500 names and said, pick 30, right, Christian? And so like, I don't know how to pick 30, so I just started culling by social sciences. I understand social sciences. But now I had 30 social science majors, and we're standing on roofs and handed tools and said, go, right? And so with training.
Better training.
And better training and all that. But so having to make turn that into a learning opportunity as well, and having the students be able to see the connection between the physical recovery and the psychosocial recovery really turned out to be, for me, one of the most transformative things for the students. So as Mark heard me tell the story at Somos the other day, but we're at a woman's house and we're working on the roof, and on the first day, we all packed our lunch, and on the second day, the woman cooked lunch, and it was nice, it was lovely. And the third day, she cooked lunch again for us, and it became more elaborate. And this time, she got out her photo albums, and she sat down beside a student who spoke no Spanish, and they went through that photo album together. And in Spanish, she said, "I haven't had anybody to cook for in 8 months." And it was just like watching this woman sort of come back to life, find meaning again in taking care of the students. And at the same time, I had a Puerto Rican student who said back to her, this food is feeding my soul. And so even though we were doing, sealing cracks in concrete roofs, which I now know how to do, they were able to see the psychosocial connection without it being, here come 30 SUNY students to provide you with counseling, right? And so to me, that was both a challenge and a real positive outcome.
And that experience isn't unique, right? Here we are 2 years later, and our volunteers every week interacting with homeowners in the communities in which we work have that experience every week, two years later. And because of the cycle of volunteers, people are there for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, whatever, you're interacting with new homeowners pretty regularly, and that experience is still happening, right? Which says a lot about the people of Puerto Rico.
Oh man, I am going to kind of buck the Admiral's directive here, and I don't know that you would ever do that with an Admiral, but I would like to go with the challenges first and then end with the accomplishments. Okay. All right.
That means you get a seat in the process.
Well, I want to talk about two challenges specifically with what I think you were getting at was for us and how we organize things or how we implement it. But I also want to talk broader about some of the challenges I saw during this process in Puerto Rico. Admiral, I don't think I ever thanked you for being challenge I'm going to mention, which I'm going to talk in a very general way about, which was the need to really prepare your service provider as well, or to be prepared that you have the right service providers. We had a student that was not prepared to go on the trip that the ship was involved in May, and it was a near disaster. And I won't get into the specifics of it at all, but again, I'm very much appreciative that you were there, because I really needed to have kind of that rock, even if it was a little while. But that really taught us a lesson. We dodged a huge bullet with that. And the person is safe and everybody else is safe now, but not after an unbelievable ordeal. So screening for people that are appropriate and doing the appropriate training is really key. The second one, I think, Devin, I think you might have pointed this out to me, and this is no knock on anybody in this room, because I really do struggle to find what the challenges are, because I think SUNY Global and everybody did such a great job of managing all these trips. It's really hard to point out something that didn't go well. But there were some other people we were involved with that represent government officials when we were there in May, who we felt were really kind of difficult to deal with. And it got to the point where our students said, we can do response better than the older generational people are doing it. And I actually think that's a great idea, and I actually encourage our students to think about a student-led kind of effort to lead post-disaster recovery. My broader reflections, I'll be pretty frank about this, is my perceptions are there has been a systematic government failure characterized by the absence of rapid and integrated coordination at the local and federal levels of Puerto Rico. In the words of one of our students, our government, and this is a perspective from one of our students, our government and society lack effective systems to respond to disasters. We are unprepared to mitigate crises related to climate change and need to generate innovative ideas as well as more initiatives. That's from a 19-year-old's perspective, just being there for a few days. The Rolling Stone did an article about this, Rolling Stone magazine, in October of 2018, quoting them, the tragedy was compounded by a slow, weak, and disorganized response by FEMA that left many people without food, water, and decent shelter for months. Now, it wasn't all FEMA. There are some really good FEMA employees and really good federal employees, but again, generalized on an agency-wide basis. 2 years later, I would posit something. There are Puerto Rican residents here. If you travel to Puerto Rico today, you'll see beautiful, lush, green Vale. If you pull that away, you will still see blue tarps on roofs. You will see infrastructure that is in dire need of repair, and that can be destroyed just in a simple windstorm. Many people still have dire needs today, and I think it's important for us to understand. I want to talk about Viellea as the positive. Start off with a little bit of the negative. So many people know the island of Viellea. Okay.